Let me share a few thoughts firstly about the death of the Queen, the reaction to it and what it says about our country and our future. Firstly, regular viewers know that I'm not a monarchist. I'm an avowed Republican and I want to criticise and even mock some of the lesser lights of the royal family from time to time. But now, of course, is not the time for any of that. Whatever anyone might think of the new king or his younger son and daughter-in-law, this is a family, a high-profile and privileged family, of course, but one that's mourning the loss of a mother, grandmother and great-grandmother. So those looking to take pot shots at the royals ought to just hold their tongues, at least for a while, and show some common decency and some personal respect. Some of them haven't in recent days, which is why I want to place on the record my respect for the Queen. Now, while I don't support the system she presides over, the inherited authority and power rather than democratic expression and authority, I think it's almost impossible to fault the life and work of Queen Elizabeth II. If there is to be a monarch, then she has provided the model, the template. Dignified, humble, dutiful and scrupulously apolitical she always was. She provided steadiness, trust, confidence and honour through good times and through difficult times. And this is why so many who never knew her or never met her mourn her deeply across the world today. Sure, there's also the celebrity factor always, of course, but this Queen was a constant in so many people's lives, and for that she was widely loved. In a way, she was above celebrity, if that makes sense. She was so famous and so unaffected by fame that she seemed to sit above it, showing a decorum that so many others do not. Many people have spoken many fine words about Queen Elizabeth II over the past few days, and none more so than former Prime Minister John Howard, of course, as a man who knew her well and defended the constitutional monarchy in this country. She was loved across the Commonwealth, of course, a disparate group of nations through Africa, Asia, Oceania and the Americas, held together this voluntary grouping of countries largely because of her stewardship over the past 70 years. But it's the words of another avowed Republican that are worth repeating, I reckon, because they show that you can both object to the British royal family sitting atop our constitutional system and at the same time you can recognise the qualities and service of the Queen. And so let's revisit the words of former Prime Minister Paul Keating, the leader who tried hardest to cut ties with the British royals, the leader who actually had those difficult discussions with the Queen. Here's what he said. Keating said the Queen was an exemplar of public leadership, married for a lifetime to political restraint, remaining always the constitutional monarch. He said, to the extent that an hereditary monarch can ever reflect the will or conscience of a people, in the case of Britain, Queen Elizabeth II assimilated a national consciousness reflecting every good instinct and custom the British people possessed and held to their heart. And Paul Keating continued, with her passing, her example of public service remains with us as a lesson in dedication to a lifelong mission in what she saw as the value of what is both enduringly good and right. Yeah, very fine words indeed there from Paul Keating. Compare that to the idiocy of the Australian Republican movement, a superficial and jingoistic organisation, if ever I've seen one, putting out a statement last week within a couple of hours of the Queen's death and seeking to conscript her to their cause. Their chairman, Peter Fitzsimons, declared the Queen backed the right of Australians to become a fully independent nation during the referendum on an Australian republic in 1999, saying that she has always made it clear that the future of the monarchy in Australia is an issue for the Australian people and them alone to decide by democratic and constitutional means. Chair of the Australian Republican movement, Peter Fitzsimons AM, expressed his sympathies and gratitude on behalf of the movement. This is what we get from that Bandana man. How disrespectful. Why not just go with sympathy and gratitude and leave the Republican campaign for later, certainly not just hours after the Queen's death? And this attempting to use a statement of the obvious by the Queen in the past as some sort of justification for the Republican cause was just too much. Really immature stuff. The Republican cause needs better leadership, more wisdom than that. Now, the Greens have been terrible too, of course. Adam Bandt and Maureen Faruqi jumping the gun and pushing the Republic and their divisive spin on other political issues instead of restraining themselves for a while and just respecting the life of a great woman. And there were footballers, actually women footballers in the AFL and the NRL who showed a real lack of class over this issue too. So there's no doubt we need to show respect, and most people have done that. But it's getting to the stage now where we have to ask about the response here in Australia and whether there is an official overreaction to what has gone on. Now, some of you will be loving the media obsession with all of this days of coverage. Others might find it over the top, something of a little relevance to your daily lives. I'm dressed like everyone in the media in a garb of mourning. Apparently this is part of the protocol. It's another hangover of the royal system. So this is new to just about all of us. We haven't had a change of monarch in more than 70 years. So we can and should discuss whether our response is appropriate. For instance, our federal parliament has been shut down for this week. It seems bizarre given the new monarch, King Charles III, will address the British Parliament sitting tonight. But our sitting has been scrapped or delayed at least.
I, as Prime Minister, have followed the procedures that have been in place for a lot longer than I've been in place as Prime Minister. I think there is something to be said for a Prime Minister who follows tradition, who follows protocols and who follows order. That is something that I hope to define my Prime Ministership, is respect for those traditions. That is what I have done. We will have a first sitting the day after the National Day of Mourning. My advice has been that that is the earliest possible opportunity when it could occur. And if the Parliament was sitting this week to do the counterfactual, the idea that we could be debating question time as usual, that we could be having the engagement as if it was business as usual is, I believe, not correct.
Yeah, well, that National Day of Mourning the Prime Minister referred to is, of course, a new one-off public holiday. That's Thursday week, a few days after the Queen's funeral. In a country that's had too many lockdowns, too many disruptions, too many costs for small business, too many days lost by school students, too many interruptions to health services, we're now to have an additional day off on a Thursday. So it'll be a 4-day grand final weekend for Victorians, and no doubt that'll happen unofficially for many others around the nation.
This is the first time that we have had a change of a head of state, and in which we have been in a position where Australia needs to and wants to give thanks to the contribution of Queen Elizabeth II as our head of state for 70 years. A one-off public holiday and a national day of mourning is an appropriate response that was agreed to by myself and the premiers and chief ministers.
Look, it really does all seem a bit too much, doesn't it? Business and medical groups have complained about this, saying it's a shambles they don't need.
Those things that are planned, those things that require much higher levels of staffing and are, where we see our hospitals running at their, peak capacity and efficiency, they are not things that we would generally be undertaking on a weekend or public holiday, because most of the work of the hospital is still done between 8 a.m. on a Monday morning and 6 p.m. on a Friday night.
With retail, you've got schedules which are set many, many weeks, sometimes months in advance, a minimum of 2 weeks. There's a lot of moving pieces that have to be put in place. And there will, of course, be a cost through both loss of trade and also the additional staff costs on that day.
Yeah, I mean, this public holiday, remember, is still 10 days away. I think we need to move on a bit more quickly than that. There's been mourning and recognition around the world, and there's much tradition, ceremony and commemoration still to unfold in the UK, and you can see that all here live to air on Sky News. And that's all to the good, if you're into that sort of thing. If you think it's all a bit over the top, well, there's footy finals at least. But as a people, as a country, we've got plenty of challenges to get on with. Might be time to get cracking.